Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and I tell you who I'm not. I'm not...
Jonathan Cohen.
You're not, but I wish you so were.
So do I.
But the person you are is lovely too.
Yes, thank you. Nice to see you, Thos. Welcome.
That's Nick, by the way, in case you're wondering.
I'm Nick Hudson. Welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. As last week, we're going to be just discussing stuff we saw in 2023.
It's not a general random walk through the highways
trees
and byways.
and cars and stuff. But so last week we talked about Time Traveler's Wife and Sometimes Old Friends.
Sunset
Boulevard and Newsies. And
there's more where that came from.
There is more where that came from. So can I talk about The Witches?
You certainly
Thos?
may. Which I think you should briefly explain. Now, using your mouth.
The Witches is a musical that was playing, well, depending when this episode goes out, was playing or still is playing at the National Theatre, the Olivier.
It's their Christmas production, really, isn't it?
It's their We Want to Be Matilda moment.
It is a Roald Dahl piece, isn't it? Yeah.
And very, very... released in 1988, big part of my childhood.
Well, the film?
The book.
Oh, the book, right.
2 films since, and now finally...
a musical!
A musical. And it's jolly good as well. I haven't seen it since its very early previews, so I can't comment on how it's developed, but...
you were impressed by what you saw?
Yes, absolutely loved it. My girlfriend Hannah and I went, and you can go and listen to a full hour of us talking about that show, so I won't bore our listeners too much about it, but do ask some questions, Thos.
I will. So, well, you've said it was great. Give me 3 points why it was great.
It's great because it's a great story. It's got humour, it's got horror.
But is that kind of Dahlish?
What do you mean by Dahlish?
He always seems to be playfully gruesome. So a lot of things that happen in Roald Dahl, including,
Lambs in the freezer and things.
Well, I was thinking Willy Wonka and those films. Yeah. There's a dark edge to even the 70s film.
Good God, there is.
Yeah, and in the books, that's all there of all his stories. It's almost like Hilaire Belloc's sort of cautionary tales. There's an element to look at the gruesome things which are happening quite often to children, but it is because these children deserve it. It's toothsome punishments.
Yeah. There's less of that in The Witches. That was very prevalent in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But in The Witches, it's for the evil women that deserve it. And a bit like Matilda, it's the children overcoming
adults,
the evil grown-ups.
Yeah.
Often with the help of nice grown-ups. But in this case, it's very theatrical because it's set in the hotel, so you can have a lot of fun with a hotel on stage, I think. And it's got the kind of iconic image of the Grand High Witch, and she makes a potion that turns children into mice, so all the mice get killed when they go to, when they in school and things. So it's just a musical I've wanted for a very long time. And last year it was the show I was most looking forward to see, because it's a national and there's a certain level of quality you expect from them, and you certainly got it with this production. The music and lyrics by Dave Malloy of the Great Comet of 1812 fame were very fun. The piece, the other thing I loved about it was a lot lighter and funnier than I was expecting it to be. Even so, Did it
work for it or against it?
It worked for it, because when you have a musical about women wishing to kill children, whilst I entirely approve of the message, you do wonder how can you get humour out of this, and that's what this production is able to do. So the songs are brilliant. The script by Lucy Kirkwood is very, very strong as well.
On point.
Sally Ann Triplett plays the grandmother character very well.
Well, that's the 3 points, and you give me a triplet.
Well, there we go. It was just nice to see something I'd never seen before. That it's that very rare feeling you get going into a musical of a story you love, or a story you don't know, and you know nothing about it.
Oh, right, okay. So it was a closed book to you before you went in, and then it was a revelation all the way through.
And we had elements of farce in it, which was great. There was a kind of 8-minute farce number with the mice running around and this whole thing of soups, because they inevitably, the witches are hoisted by their own petard because they drink their own poison. in the soup that the mice have poured into the soup. And there's this whole thing about soupity soup, soup, it's time for soup. And it's a bit silly. It's a bit kind of...
Isn't that the cut song from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs?
It could be. There's elements of Fawlty Towers in there. There's elements of Wes Anderson in the set design when it comes to the hotel, possibly on purpose because Wes Anderson's done a couple of Roald Dahl adaptations himself.
Resonance, anyway.
Yeah. And it was just really, really lovely to see something new. And I think that's what made it so special.
That's interesting, because I haven't seen it, and I'm not the right generation for Dahl. I mean, he wrote for years and years, and obviously we did read Roald Dahl stories when I was a little boy, but I never fell in love with him in quite the same way, which is not to say I don't enjoy his work. So I wasn't necessarily attracted to this. But it's interesting that you've been speaking so positively about it as a piece, and it's not the first time that witches have turned up in a musical.
There's an episode.
Yeah, well, yes, you're right. I mean, obviously, there's the Witches of Eastwick immediately come to mind, and any musical adaptation of Macbeth, of which I've been talking about, Vote Macbeth, a number of times in the last year, which was a fabulous show at the last 2 Edinburgh Festival Fringes. But the interesting thing to me, the odd thing, you've just reminded me, you were saying it's set in a hotel, and the hotel offers you so many interesting things. At the last year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe, there was a musical called The Grand Old Opera House, which is actually an old opera house which has been turned into a hotel, which also has elements of a farce, and it's a jukebox opera, which is a very rare concept.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone liked it. Colin Malloy didn't much like it, but I thought it was fabulous. And it was terribly well reviewed, and I think it went on a short tour. But so I agree with you that there is an opportunity in hotels as well for great musicals. I mean, a few years ago, there was Grand Hotel, which I'm sure of which you're aware. But going back to The Witches, I'm delighted that you enjoyed it as much. And as you say, if people want to find out more in detail, go back to the episode that went out only a few weeks ago here on Musical Talk.
Yeah, well, a few months ago now, but...
well, it's still months are still weeks,
yeah,
so that's
exactly.
correct. Can I ask you a final question on
Please
The Witches,
do.
though, which is, how did you enjoy your How to Stop a Witch activity book?
Well...
which I notice is on the back of the programme.
I mean, it's lovely. They have kind of two things here. One is upside down and the other one isn't. It's fun because they know their audience. They know it's a family show, so they want to keep the kids.
Mummy and Daddy are taking the children, So
and
the front is the normal programme and the back is for the kiddies.
Yes,
you don't appear to have done your maze.
No, sorry about that. We are more perturbed.
The show was amazing.
We were more disturbed by the fact they advertised this cocktail
Hello.
in the
Kiddie section?
No, in the grown-up section.
Good.
And they didn't sell it.
Oh, well, really?
Yeah, we were on the third evening of the whole run. They said, we stopped doing it now.
Oh.
And I just thought that's utterly bizarre. So if anyone has seen it since...
Or drunk the cocktail.
Yeah, do let us know.
Yeah. I hoped it was Vimto and Tizer.
Well, no, it was this beautiful purple, poisony looking thing. Potiony looking thing, rather. And it's just a shame they didn't do it. So that's The Witches. I believe still playing at the National to the end of January, so maybe you should go and see it, Thos, and see some good comedy, because it is a musical comedy.
A comedy!
Yes.
Well, talking of musical comedies, can we talk about the one which I saw at the end of 2023, which was...
You're crazy.
It was crazy for you. And in terms of musical comedy, it hit the mark perfectly for me. It's genuinely interesting. I remember when it first turned up in the 90s, Crazy for You, because it's a kind of reworking of Girl Crazy, the 1930s Gershwin musical, which is now remembered mostly for introducing Ethel Merman and indeed Ginger Rogers, and it's where Ginger Rogers met Fred Astaire because he was brought in briefly as the choreographer. So Girl Crazy, and it introduces I Got Rhythm, some real smash hit Gershwin numbers in it. It was reworked in the 90s quite considerably. And
it was Susan Stroman and her husband Mike Ockrent who did it originally.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And of course she came back to direct it again here in London after last year's Chichester.
Yeah.
So it came to London. Charlie Stemp in the lead role, and you do need someone who can act and do comedy and dance. And my goodness, he can do those things. But the show, I remember, as I say, I remember buying the British cast recording and the Broadway cast recording, and the reason I bought both is because the American cast recording includes the overture and the song Crazy for You, whereas the British version, for whatever reason, did not feature the song Crazy for You, which is what the show is named after, although of course it isn't, because actually the show is called Crazy for You and the song is called KKK, Crazy for You.
I can see why they cut that.
Well, it's in the show.
Okay.
It's right at the beginning of the show. And it's such an odd song because it is one of those very difficult things to carry off. It's a bad song sung speech marks badly by the central actor, the Charlie Stemp character, Bobby Childs. So to Bella Zangler, the great producer of Ziegfeld-style follies, because he wants to be in them. And he's that first time we see him, he sings Crazy for You and does dancing beyond anything that most of us in the audience could have done, but his speech marks not good enough and is a little bit hackneyed. And it's quite brave for any show to start off by getting their lead actor, the one who's the name, let's be honest, Charlie Stemp is a name, name above the credits kind of thing. He has to come on, he has to fumble a song and fumble a dance, and then, of course, go on to become brilliant in the rest of the piece. It's actually such a big ask, and yet the audience buy it every time. And that song is Crazy for You. And if you listen to Crazy for You on the recording, you'll think this is such a throwaway Gershwin song. In fact, it is such a throwaway Gershwin song. I've never come across a recording of it outside of
Crazy for You.
Crazy for You. It's not a great Gershwin standard, which is frequently recorded by Frank Sinatra or anyone else. It is really from the obscure
Especially
end of the
now.
market. Well, yes, obviously, but you know what I mean. There's been plenty of years to be doing your Gershwin recordings, and there are plenty of albums of rare and undiscovered Gershwin songs. For every I Got Rhythm, there's Blah, 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 which is a great song, by the way, but it's called Blah, Blah, Blah. But we were talking last week in lyrics, we were talking about the idea of music, a good musical song should have an idea behind it, and the song Blah Blah Blah, which ironically isn't in Crazy for You, but I'm just using it as a good example, is a song that a man sings to his female love. He starts off by saying, I've written you a song, a wonderful refrain, I hope you like it, and then he improvises a song. It's a bit of a cheat, actually. It's a really clever idea by Ira Gershwin here. It's blah, 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 moon, blah, 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 June, blah, 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 spoon, all that kind of stuff.
Which is therefore...
so it's the hackneyed lyrics.
Referenced in Curtains, isn't it? When he sings People Rhyme...
Oh.
Knife.
Knife.
Yeah.
That's like life and knife. Yes, you're quite right. Love and glove. Yeah, in this case, Ira Gershwin has highlighted all the hackneyed rhymings of a love song and then not bothered to put them into... So he's got them all to rhyme, but he's not bothered to give them any words that make any kind of sense, because the joke is the song is just a standard love song and the fella is using blah, blah, blah to fill the words. So I spent a lot of time talking about a song which isn't in Crazy for You, but I want to talk about that as an idea for a song. It's got a really good idea and it's really cleverly written. And so if you think Ira Gershwin was clever there, after Crazy for You, the rest of the score is solid gold as far as I'm concerned. Now, I love Gershwin more than almost any other composers. He's right up there in my top rank. Gilbert and Sullivan and Gershwin are the people who bought me.
To say.
But they've given me more pleasure than almost anyone else. I love Cole Porter, I love Sondheim, I love all these people. But when I need
rhythm,
when I need rhythm, yeah, why not? But when I need pep, then I go to Gershwin. And pep's the word. That's such a 1930s word. It really, he's got brio, he's got pep. He's, and all these songs in Crazy for You are that. Charlie Stemp up to this point was also a revelation, which is odd because we all know he's brilliant. But most of the roles that Charlie Stemp has had up to now have been speech marks, the straight romantic lead in pantomime, because he's done the Palladium pantomimes for many years, or in Half a Sixpence. He plays the... affable, likeable
cheeky
man.
Lad is the term.
Cheeky lad. He plays a cheeky man as Bert in Mary Poppins. He plays very affable. He's either the romantic lead or he's affable. Now, affable's lovely. Romantic lead is lovely, and he's a very handsome man. But comedy is a very different thing again. And I'd never really seen him do comedy, not properly. And I was delighted to see that he has got comic chops, because he could do the comedy brilliantly in this. Physical comedy, there's a lovely moment where the principal villain, speech mark, says to him, "You are close to an idiot," which is meant as an insult, and he just takes an exaggerated step away from the man who's made the insult, which just, it's childish but huge fun. There's a lovely scene towards the beginning of Act 2 where he and Bella Zangler,
The mirror scene.
basically, I mean, straight out of the Marx Brothers, that is, but it's gorgeous. And they have this lovely rediscovered Gershwin song, What Causes That, which was lost until the 80s when a copy was found and they've been able to interpolate it. So speech marks, it's a new Gershwin song. You won't find many recordings of What Causes That because it did not exist from Gershwin's death until the 80s.
The one question I have, and we'll move on, but
That's what you think.
do you think the songs are shoehorned into the story, and how much of the story is Girl Crazy and how much of it is Susan Stroman and Mike Ockrent?
A close reading of the programme will tell you that it was originally going to be an adaptation of Girl Crazy. It was going to be a revival of Girl Crazy, and then they quickly realised it wasn't going to have legs because just socioeconomics and politics of the 1930s just doesn't play now. So they basically took some of the concepts. So the concepts are New York stage and then the Wild West. So that's all in Girl Crazy. So if you like, the locations are unchanged. But the finessing of the plot is very, very different, and the characters have been rewritten in very significant ways. It's not easy to see Ethel Merman sang I Got Rhythm in Girl Crazy. And Ginger Rogers, as I say, was also in Girl Crazy. Now, I don't know what roles they played, but I would guess that Ginger Rogers was...
The young love.
The
heroine.
The young female character was the heroine, yes, for want of a better phrase. The ingenue, I suppose. I'm guessing that a young Ethel Merman in 1930 would have probably been the soubrette, the comedy secondary character. But it's the ingenue character who gets I Got Rhythm here, and it's not clear who the Ethel Merman character would have been in the Crazy for You. So it is a jukebox. The songs, for the most part, work quite well because by Gershwin's dead, but he leaves an enormous, very productive man. But he had such a high strike rate of standards in his collection. So there's a lot of really good songs, and there's normally this idea of ideas. You can take an idea, there were 10 Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers RKO films, one of which has a Gershwin score, and then Fred Astaire had another Gershwin score, musical without Ginger Rogers. So there's 2 Gershwin films which have got solid gold songs all the way through, and half those scores are in Crazy for You because the ideas fit. Here's a song about jazz, slap that bass. Here's a song about they can't take that away from me, or whatever. A song about loss in a relationship that's easily transported from one to the other. So they don't stick very hard. They're not difficult to shoehorn in, as you say. They don't look like they're difficultly placed. There are a few songs which are, of course. There's a very silly song in the middle of Act 2, which I love the song. It's called Stiff Upper Lip. It comes from that Fred Astaire musical, which is the film RKO 1930s, Fred Astaire with the Gershwins, but without Ginger Rogers, called A Damsel in Distress. In it, there's a song called Stiff Upper Lip, because it's set in London, which is why we get A Foggy Day in London Town. One of the great Gershwin songs comes from that film. The song is called Stiff Upper Lip. It's used several times. If you listen to the film, there's a kind of British folk version of it, but it's a kind of fighting song. It's
keep the home fires burning in a way.
Yes, but a bit more, a bit comic, and it's full of what I would call transatlantic interpretations of what a British person's like. So everyone goes around saying "stiff upper lip, stout fellow, carry on, old chap," all that kind of stuff.
A bit like you, Thos.
Well, indeed, a bit like me, I suppose. But it's almost overplayed. It's very much a caricature of what the Americans thought a Brit was like in the 1930s.
A bit like you, Thos.
It's in...
the only musical talk presenter ever to wear a tie.
If someone wants to give me a very lot of money, I shall become a butler. This one is shoehorned into Act 2 of Crazy for You, not unpleasantly, because basically there's a very... The secondary comic couple, ironically, are the 2 Brits who are silly-ass Brits, but who obviously know more than they're letting on anyway. There's an edge to them, but they're toying with the people in the town a bit, actually.
They're explorers, aren't they?
But they're explorers, but they're also hotel guide writers. And so they go to the old...
Well, side note, when I saw it, my lovely friend Nathan was playing the male part, which was very nice to see him in that role.
On the West End?
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. I say I like the characters, but they deliberately cause trouble for their hotel owner knowingly but seemingly not knowingly. That's the great thing about it. You know there's an edge to them. Anyway, they come on halfway through Act 2 and give everyone everyone's about to give up on saving the theatre in the Wild West. So they give the rousing speech through Stiff Upper Lip. It works. It's very silly, but we're a British audience watching British stereotype or pair of British stereotypes. Obviously, no one objects. It's great fun. It doesn't reflect anyone who's in Britain today. It probably didn't reflect anyone who was in Britain in the 1930s.
Well, it's why the Brits love in Hamilton when King George comes on. It
feels a bit more British, at least broadly.
That goes down the most
in the West End. Anyway. Yeah. Well, I'm not in any way with Yes, my sympathies are all with George III.
You knew him well, didn't you?
So good. I mean, let's be honest. George III's so good. He's the third of a 4-film sequence. When that song comes on, it's Stiff Upper Lip, and it's the rousing song to get everyone to decide they are going to save the theatre after all, or at least that's the attempt. It's great fun. It's very shoehorned in. You could completely take that out. It has a function. There will be other songs in the Gershwin catalogue. It feels like it works backwards. It feels like Stiff Upper Lip is in there to do what it needs to do, and therefore they need 2 British characters to do it, and therefore those British characters have been written in. Therefore, those British characters never quite gel in the whole piece.
They pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Not because I dislike them. I think they're very funny. In fact, they get many, many, many laughs. But they feel the least speech marks real in a very non-real, cartoony kind of piece. And I will just say this fact, fans, they changed the lyrics of the song, which I had to go back and check, funnily enough, because I know the song very well and I sing it to myself when I'm washing up, amongst other Gershwin songs. And the line in question is, does the fighting spirit win? Quite. Which, of course, the word quite is associated by the Americans as being a very British speech idiom, very idiomatic speech.
Quite.
And I agree. Yes, well, quite. We do use it exactly in that context. I use it, you use it. So in that sense, it's not wrong. But that is the lyric. Does the fighting spirit win? Quite. Because it's the British people responding to their own question. In this West End version of Crazy for You, for reasons I do not understand, they said, does the fighting spirit win? Fight. Which actually I think is a less good lyric. It's less funny. It's less playful. It's just saying more of the same.
Yeah.
I don't know why they made that change. And that is...
Sure, we could find out, because an old friend of the podcast, Andrew Corcoran, is the assistant MD on the show.
He might have an intake, yeah.
And he steps in sometimes. And when I went to see it, he took the final bow, which was lovely.
And when I saw it the last time, I saw it 3 times, and the last time I saw it, he also took the final bow. I had to fight myself from jumping up and shouting, Andrew! But it was lovely seeing him.
Because I saw it at the Regent's, but not the Regent's Park production, but I saw the production when it moves into town. So I've seen it. Seen 2 different productions, but I much preferred this one because it just seemed a lot wider as a production, and I loved when the Pross Arch changed from the glitz and the glamour to the kind of rustic Western.
And he does it in a trice, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Andrew told me they wanted that moment to be visible. So it is lit up in a way that the audience do. It's kind of a fun joke, and I loved it. And it's you can relive I Got Rhythm on last year's Royal Variety performance, should you wish to watch it again. That's
right. Also, there's a truncated version of the already very short song Crazy for You, which is where we came in. So if people want to see Charlie Stemp singing a badly written song, deliberately badly, quite badly performed, you can.
I look forward to Charlie appearing in this new dance musical, which they're doing, which is, I think, Stemp.
I will make one observation about Charlie Stemp. His physical build is more Gene Kelly than it is Fred Astaire.
Okay.
Fred Astaire is all thin and elegance. Gene Kelly is dancing truck driver, much more muscular. Charlie Stemp looks to me to be slightly broader and slightly shorter than a Fred Astaire tall, elegant dancer, which is not a criticism. I like all styles of that range. And I was looking at him on stage, and I was thinking, why do you look different from the advertising? And it's because if you look at some of the posters, and indeed in the auditorium, there's a rather lovely cutout of the Charlie Stemp character in full dance.
You put your head in the hole, do you?
And you put your head in the hole and you get photographed by your friends. And I do have that photograph, ladies and gentlemen.
I would love to see that.
I may privately show it to you. But the interesting thing is they have, for some reason, elongated Charlie Stemp's body. So he's got the long, tall, elegant body. He looks like he's about 6'5", and his legs look like they're about 6'3" of that. It's a really remarkable, odd body shape. It's I immediately clocked it because it didn't look quite human. It made him look very thin, very elegant, and it obviously made the dance move that was being portrayed in that photograph, where you stick your head through and where Charlie Stemp's head would normally be, look even more.
Who are matron?
Look even more acrobatic than usual. And when you see him on the stage, he's a terribly handsome man. He's a terribly good dancer. He's a terribly good comic. He's a terribly good actor. But he's not that shape. He's a perfectly lovely shape, but he's not that shape. He's Gene Kelly and he's not Fred Astaire. I just don't understand why they've done the elongated picture. But there we are. That's one of his tiny little things which will be forgotten in the midst of time almost immediately.
He is a true star. I mean, we don't have many of them in this country, but he is turning into one of those.
He is. And this takes us back to where we started, actually. I said that he was funny in this. He's normally these affable or romantic characters. He's very, very funny. In fact, he spends most of it dressed as Bella Zangler, to the point where I think he's the better Bella Zangler in terms of, that's not just, the other actor's brilliant as Bella Zangler, but what I mean is I really like him with, I think Charlie Stemp looks great with a beard, but he can do comedy, and that means he will have a long career. He's not reliant on his looks. He's not reliant on his dance because, eventually the body will tire and he won't be able to do all that. He will have a long career. My prediction is that Charlie Stemp will be the next Gary Wilmot. Gary Wilmot, who was the bee's knees in the 80s and 90s and is still fabulous, has matured into this fabulous character comedy actor who we all saw recently in many, many things, but, just name one, anything goes.
Yeah. What would you like to see, or whom would you like to see Charlie Stemp play?
Well, the obvious fit, and it's probably too obvious to happen, is that I really enjoyed the version of Top Hat that went round a few years ago, which is the Irving Berlin musical, with a cracking score once again, based on the film of the same name, which is a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers film. I would love to see Charlie Stemp in a Fred Astaire role. So I would put him in as the character who's called Jerry in that Fred Astaire role. I would put him in as Jerry in Top Hat. Problem is, Top Hat only left the West End about 5-6 years ago. But if someone was saying, why don't we make an adaptation of a Fred Astaire film onto the stage from that sequence of Fred and Ginger's, Charlie Stemp's got to be a shoo-in.
I want to talk to you, I guess it's a musical.
We take a broad interpretation here?
We do, yes. Andrew and I were very lucky to be asked last year to go and see, for a second time, Mamma Mia the Party.
Well, I feel very honoured to be hearing you talk about it because we discussed it after you saw it the first time.
Did we? Okay,
yes.
Well, there we go. There's probably not much to say about it, other than the fact it's...
Do you like olives? Do I like olives what?
Do you like Oliver's Twist? It's brilliant. It really is a fun evening, and
right. Well, I want to hear this because we could briefly have a few minutes talking about immersive theatre, of which that is possibly the best known example.
Yes,
but there's also the Guys and Dolls, which I saw.
There is, yeah.
But do carry on.
Think about Mamma Mia as a piece, though. It's that rare thing where you've got 4 different versions of a musical. So you got the film, the second film, the Mamma Mia the Party, and Mamma Mia on stage. Yeah. And soon there's going to be a third film.
Is there?
So that's going to be 5 different... Yeah. That's going to be 5 different versions. So Mamma Mia is no longer a musical. It is a brand.
Oh, well, yes, undoubtedly.
And I'm all for it. I think it's a lovely idea. The show is excellent. I've seen Mamma Mia the Party.
And Charlie Stemp was in one of the original casts on the West End, or
probably.
Yeah, he was in the chorus there before he was discovered. Yeah,
I've seen Mamma Mia the Party twice, which is more than I've seen Mamma Mia on stage, which is once. And I would like to return to Mamma Mia because
the stage.
Yeah, because it is. The film will be 16 years old this year.
Is it really?
Yeah.
So, goodness.
So they kindly sent us last year to see Mamma Mia the Party because it's the stage show is 30 years old now or something terrifying like that. My usual question is, Thos, would you go to it?
I'd like to answer that, if I may, by bringing in the Guys and Dolls, which is an interactive version. So together they make a pair of bookends, but I think they're doing it differently.
Well, there's no food at Guys and Dolls, is there?
Well, funnily enough, you can buy madeleines in the foyer, should you be interested, which I've never seen in a theatre before. And one of the people I went with was almost more entranced by the light refreshments than they were than the show. I suppose, tell me I'm wrong, but Mamma Mia the Party, I get the impression, is that you are in the place where, it's a tavern or whatever it is.
You are in the place, the fictional...
Yeah.
a fictional version of the real tavern where they made the film. And they are setting up a party to celebrate the anniversary of the filming. Are you with me?
Yeah.
The filming of Mamma Mia, into which we see a musical of the people living in the tavern and on the island who all have love triangles and things.
So there are parallels in the... Yeah. I see. That sounds quite clever. Your question was, would I go? And the answer is, I would if I was asked, but I wouldn't go without being asked, if that makes sense. I wouldn't go under my own steam.
Would you pay £190 minimum to go, is what you got to also ask yourself for Mamma Mia the party, because it ain't cheap.
No, I can see that for £190 a pop. I would think quite heavily about that, because that is a lot of money, it seems to me. But the Guys and Dolls is doing a more traditional thing in an interactive way. It is still a stage version of Guys and Dolls. Have you seen it?
No, and I'm not a big fan of Guys and Dolls, and I would either be annoyed walking around the stage, or I would get annoyed sitting, watching other people walk around the stage.
Well, I think you may have hit the nail on the head, because... Now, I have to be very honest here. The people I've been to see it with agreed with me, but a lot of people that we've spoken to since have said it's the best thing they've seen in London. So it's really dividing opinion. You either love it or you hate it. But it is essentially a stage version.
I think I just shout, sit down, you're rocking the show.
Yeah, quite. Sit down, you're wrecking the show might be the best version of that. I didn't warm to it. Now, we were not in the mosh pit version on the stage. We were in the audience.
Very modern term for you, Thos.
I think I've reached the 1970s. We were sitting
begrudgingly.
But we were sitting in what I'm going to call it wasn't the stalls, because there isn't any stalls per se. Or
circle, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. We're on the one level up. For one of us, there were three of us in the group. It was one of them's first time seeing Guys and Dolls. Knowing it to be a legendary show, was very much looking forward to it. What we discovered was that some of the seats in the circle don't have terribly good views, because some of the scenery goes up and down. There were traffic lights in front of us at various points, so we couldn't quite see everything. Not all the time, but it wasn't brilliantly designed for eye lines. I certainly got the impression that if you were sitting in what were normal theatrical seats, you were very much a secondary customer. There was a large number of people in, it's done in the round, on the stage with the actors. And the way they're differentiated from the actors is that the actors very often perform their scenes on rising blocks which come out of the stage. So if you like, they go higher. So if you're in the, let's call it the mosh pit, but if you're in the on the stage as a member of the community in New York at that time, meeting all these people on the street, Sky Masters, and so you are basically seeing up their trouser leg. But the distraction thing is, and you hit the nail on the head and you haven't seen it, is that the way the crowds are orchestrated is that there are some people there who are part of the production dressed as American traffic cops and policemen. And therefore, when they need to move people around to allow they basically, And that happens normally 30 seconds before the end of every song or 30 seconds before the end of every scene. So just as a scene is reaching its climax or punchline, suddenly the mass of humanity on the stage is forced into moving, and if you are concentrating on what's going on, it's very difficult to stay concentrating on the actual narrative, which must be the point of theatre, because suddenly 50 people are being asked to move. Now, I know from the people who have done that they loved it. It looked terrible to me. It diminished the piece because it was very distracting.
Forgive me, if you were in that group of people being moved and you're
also missing the end of
the song or a scene,
yeah,
it's like the lights fading 30 seconds early.
Yeah, you're getting 2/3 of every song. Yeah, it's terrible. It's very nicely performed on the whole. There are two things you either like or you don't like the interactivity of it. Fine, I don't. You ask why, the answer is you can get more people in. It's simple as that. Many more people in that auditorium than you would have in a normal theatre, therefore more money. Absolutely understand the imperative there. Two things.
But why not just sit them on stage?
Don't know. Except that doesn't look speech marks natural. I think.
But what does the walking around...
It's interactive.
Achieve. But are you interacting with the actors?
No.
Then it's not interactive.
They walk past you as they climb onto their blocks. Yeah. No, of course not. It's not. None of these. Would you want it to be? Would you pay to actually watch members of the public talk to Sky Masterson? I wouldn't. They do a little show in the interval, by the way, if you want, the cast come out and sing songs, and it's lovely if you like that kind of thing. If you're not filling your face with madeleines. Fine. Absolutely. Two things about it I want to say on top, because I'm fully aware that a number of people really didn't like the show in the same way I didn't, but a lot of people really loved it, and the people who loved it seem to have really loved it and find it impossible to believe that it's anything other than stick in the muddery if you didn't like it. I don't think it is stick in the muddery. I actually think that it's actually diminishing the piece. But there are two things extra. One is the tempi. It was so slow. Sit down, you're rocking the boat. Should be, I think, a fairly fast number. There's a wider thing going on in society today, and you see it in the quality newspapers talking about this. People who now watch television with the subtitles on because they're not paying attention. There's this idea that the current generation are unable to retain information at speed because they're too busy concentrating on other bits and pieces.
You made it 40 minutes into this episode. Well done.
Radical. There we are. The issue is that the tempi were very slow. I assumed to aid understanding in an environment where understanding was being diminished by the interactivity, I guess. But it did mean that some of the show-stopping numbers, like Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat, was disappointing because it was a bit slow. Nicely sung, but a bit slow. That's one point. And you either like it or you don't. A lot of people didn't notice that, but a lot of people did. And then the other point, and I've not seen this mentioned anywhere, so I don't understand why people aren't up in arms about this. End of Act 1. Sky takes Sarah Brown to Cuba to try and get, she's a Salvation Army woman. He's trying to get her hair, he's trying to get her to get her hair down. And in the usual version of this, what happens is he goes to Cuba and they have a fabulous night out and blah, blah, blah. And, she starts to fall for him, essentially. It's an important point of the plot. So they fly out to Cuba in 1950 or whenever it is. They go to a nightclub, a bar. Now, in order to meet modern sensibilities, the bar turns out to be a gay bar. Certainly not as originally written. But that's fine. I don't care about that. I don't get particularly excited about this. That would work perfectly if, for whatever reason, and it's either in the text or in the direction, Sky starts dancing with one of the gay dancers in the gay bar. Shows what a metrosexual guy he is for our modern sensibilities. Once again, doesn't bother me that. Wouldn't have happened at all in 1950. But that's what happens here. Sarah Brown is shown to be jealous because there's this man she's now starting to fall for, Sky, dancing with someone else. In this case, it's a man, but that's by the by. She feels jealous. So she wades in and she breaks them up forcibly. And it becomes a brawl. And so essentially what you get is you have a religious character, let us never forget. Sarah Brown is a Salvation Army woman. In 1950, that's unlikely to be a very liberal attitude. Going to a gay bar in Cuba, punching a gay guy, and then causing a riot. And so the sensibility here is, and she's our heroine, let us not forget, our heroine performs an enormously homophobic act in front of us, and everyone claps. And then, they run off into the night. And the next thing we see, they wake up on the jetty, Sky and Sarah, with hangovers, and they get up and they have a laugh. And no one says, by the way, didn't you punch a gay guy last night and then cause a riot in a homophobic way in a gay bar? None of that's mentioned. So we're left, and it's the point where they start becoming a couple, if you like. So we get this very odd sense, if you're, I couldn't see how you can't read this. There's no other way of reading it. Sarah Brown, who's got very firm, what you might even call fundamentalist Christian attitudes, performs an enormously homophobic act, which our romantic hero finds terribly attractive. It's never mentioned again. There's no remonstration, and then the couples get away with it. It's terrible. I was so appalled. I no one, I've seen it in a review. I've not seen anyone say, hang on a minute, what were they thinking? It's just because...
It's almost like the director doesn't understand the piece.
Well, I couldn't possibly say that, but I would say this. I would say that I think the piece is so dedicated to being speech marks interactive, they've stopped putting much thought into the way it's been done. That's not just direction, I just mean overall. It feels to me like it's speech marks a crowd pleaser. Most people wouldn't have looked at that and thought the way I thought, I suppose, because they're so intoxicated by the dancing, the rhythm and the piece they're in. They're enjoying it. But the very fact, if you look at what's being told to you, in this interpretation, which must have come from the director, I guess, but whatever, in this interpretation, there is an enormously homophobic act, which is deemed to be positive, as it were, for the characters at the end of Act 1. It's repulsive. Anyway, there we are. That was my view on Guys and Dolls. As you can see, I was terribly disappointed. There's a great show in there, but that isn't the production for it. But conversely, that's only my view. If you're the kind of person who likes interactive musicals, then go and see it, and you might very well like it.
There's a whole discussion about the whole immersive, Start Express, I'm sure, will be labelled as immersive because they're all
Unless
around
they give me a pair of
you.
skates, I'm not sure that's true. But what about, there's... Cabaret is being described as immersive, and that's the very thing that's, funny enough, having seen the Guys and Dolls, I don't want to go anywhere near it because of that. It may be brilliant, and I'm sure it is, but I don't want to see it because I don't want interactive theatre.
You're getting interactive confused with immersive.
That's true.
I've never seen...
I do like interactive theatre because I love panto.
Yeah, no, you don't. So immersive...
You make a good point.
Immersive theatre is generally, if there's food and drink involved that is linked to the piece and the actors walk around you. So you could say that the production of Sweeney Todd that was in the pie shop was immersive. It was never labelled as such.
No.
It would be nowadays. Cabaret, you could say...
in the Kit Kat Club,
is in the Kit Kat Club, and that was immersive theatre.
Yeah.
What one could call dinner theatre in the olden days, because it's a big buzzword nowadays.
Oh yeah, it's a selling point, isn't it?
This is an immersive episode of Musical Talk because we're in stereo. But that's the kind
if you've got two ears, that would work. Yes,
that's the kind of level that a lot of this stuff is at. And someone mentioned me I was chatting to someone on X, Twitter, about it today. I said, I'm doing a thesis on immersive theatre.
Oh, are they?
So it's obviously becoming...
Getting everyone else to write it for them.
Yeah, it's getting another genre. But back to Mamma Mia.
Yes. Which sounds like a different kettle of fish.
It's a different kettle of fish. It's a different kettle of salad. It's a different kettle of Greek lamb. I think you'd enjoy it, Thos, because it is very tongue-in-cheek. It's very presented. The set you are in is all around you, and it is amazing what they've done. And the food's delicious. That's a very important thing. It
is, yeah. You don't want a piece of old nonsense, do you? No, quite. You don't want Rivitas are lovely, but you don't want that for dinner. Yes.
No. And what Sandy Toksvig did with the Swedish script was very, very funny. Well, I brought up the price.
What Sandy Toksvig did with the Swedish script?
So it's a Swedish production originally, opened in Stockholm.
And she adapted it,
and she adapted it into English.
Sandy?
Yeah, because she speaks Swedish.
Even though she's actually Danish, of course. But how very interesting. Right, I didn't know that at all.
It's not cheap, but you are there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
It's a 3-act piece, and then there's a disco at the end, at which point I leave.
I was going to say I wouldn't have been there for 5 hours then.
Well, you'll be there for...
I'd be there for the show part.
Yeah, but you get your 3 courses, you get your food and your wine and your bread and your drink and your salad, and it is a wonderful...
It generates an atmosphere, I suppose.
Celebration of life, and it makes you want to go on holiday. It's that kind of... It's everything that Mamma Mia did originally.
There isn't, presumably, like there is in Guys and Dolls, the option to just sit in the audience watching this, because you have to be in the taverna to make this work.
Yeah.
Well, that probably is better, because the version of Guys and Dolls...
No one's walking around.
Yeah, it's a little bit... Well, it's neither fish nor fowl, or it's both, in fact. You can be in the mosh pit, or you can be watching it.
Yeah.
Because it's straddling both and not really succeeding.
I mean, there are different levels. There's a ground level, and then there's the kind of upper, the cheaper seats. But everyone has the meal.
What theatre in Britain is it? Yes.
But there's just something joyous about it, and the fact that Andrew's gone 3 times. I've seen it twice, and it's still...
This is Andrew Keating.
Yeah, it's irreverent, it's funny, it's got wacky staging at some points. It's just a celebration of life and the wonderful, wonderful songs that ABBA have done. And you've got to give ABBA credit, with ABBA Voyage as well. They're still relevant.
They are, no doubting that. I mean, the thing about Mamma Mia is it translates as Mother Dear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And, of course, Dear is what it is, as you describe. It doesn't stop it being a great show.
No. Well, as we travelled around Greece and America and New York and the Grand Hotel for the Witches, I think it's time we...
Are we saying ta-ta to the taverna?
Yes. Until next time, where we shall resume this trilogy of time... travel, I guess you could call it.
Well, I see that you're going to. Yes, well done.
We shall see you next week. Until then, thank you so much for listening. And,
yes, and thank you for listening to me in particular.
Yes, and me. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.